Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a mystery it's captivated humanity for over a century. What if there was something up there right now, challenging everything we thought we knew about space and, our place in it? Our mission today is to explore this fascinating and persistent enigma, the alleged Black Knight satellite. We'll be sifting through a whole stack of intriguing sources, everything from scientific reports and newspaper articles to personal accounts and some, frankly, pretty wild speculative theories.
It really is a remarkably complex topic, isn't it? I mean, the information, it spans over a century and involves just numerous conflicting explanations. Our goal in this deep dive is really to lay out the facts as they're reported in these sources, no matter how unusual they might seem, and hopefully encourage you, the listener, to think critically about what's actually been reported over the years. The fact that this mystery endures, despite all the attempts to explain it away, that's quite remarkable in itself.
Right, so let's unpack this. Let's go right back to the very beginning, 1899. Nikola Tesla.
Brilliant guy. He had this experimental lab out in Colorado Springs, right? Big setup, massive 200-foot tower for transmission and reception. And apparently, alone in his lab one night, Tesla observed what he cautiously called electrical actions, things that definitely appeared to be intelligence signals.
Yeah, he was apparently so amazed he thought it was, extraterrestrial communication. Initially, he was thinking Mars. He even wrote this letter, didn't he, to the American Red Cross, claiming he got a dramatic 1, 2, 3 message.
He did, and the press, well, you can imagine, they pretty much ridiculed him, but it's possible, isn't it, that he was actually the very first person to detect radio waves coming from space.
Oh, absolutely. For the time, his claims were just nothing short of revolutionary, almost fantastical for most people back then. But what's really striking, even with the ridicule, is how his experience hinted at something genuinely profound. It wasn't just random noise to him. He perceived intelligence. And crucially, he wasn't the last one to pick up on something strange up there. That's the key, isn't it? So, if Tesla faced ridicule, did later scientists like Marconi, when they found weird stuff, did they handle it differently or face the same thing?
That's a great question. So fast forward maybe 20 years, January 1920, you've got Guglielmo Marconi, the pioneer of long-distance radio. He also picked up strange, undecipherable radio messages from space. What's really compelling here is that these signals, they were received simultaneously by distant stations, like London and New York at the same time.
Ah, so that rules out simple terrestrial interference then.
Pretty much, yeah. Or at least makes it much less likely. And it wasn't just the big names either. Amateur radio operators all around the world, they reported similar inexplicable signals throughout the 1920s. It adds another layer to this growing pattern.
Okay, so the technology gets better. By 1927, 1928,
Yeah.
there was a Norwegian professor, right, and someone from the Naval Operations Center.
Yes, a math professor from Oslo University and a chief consultant from the Naval Ops Center. They managed to combine their tech. Using echo radio transmission, they actually triangulated the origin of a signal.
Okay, so they pinpointed it.
Well, pinpointed might be generous by today's standards. They managed to locate its origin somewhere between 20 and 6,200 miles out. Huge range, obviously. But it was a monumental leap. For the first time, these weird signals were tied to a physical location, a distance from Earth. It was a concrete step away from just pure guesswork. It turned whispers into actual measurable data.
And that data, decades later, becomes absolutely central for Duncan Lunan. He was an astronomer, also a science fiction author. In 1973, he claims he deciphered a hidden message from that very echo data. And he said this message came from an object at the L5 point. That's one of those stable gravitational points between Earth and the Moon, right? Pretty unusual place for something natural.
Exactly. L5 is a Lagrange point. And Lunan's deciphering, was incredibly specific. He laid out the message contents. Our home sun is Epsilon Boötis. It is a double star. We live on the 6th or 7th planet, and so on. Details about moons, planets, and this really startling claim, our satellite is in orbit around your moon. He even went further, believing the probe was over 12,000 years old, based on how the stars in Boötis would have looked back then.
Wow. 12,000 years old. That's quite a claim. What did the broader scientific community make of Lunan's work? Did they buy it?
Well, no, not really. His work was met with, let's say, significant skepticism, especially in mainstream science. It was fascinating, sure, but largely dismissed as, pareidolia, seeing patterns that aren't really there, or maybe just a very creative interpretation. But it does highlight something interesting about that time, doesn't it? This real deep desire to find meaning in the unknown, to connect with something beyond Earth. It sort of blurred the lines between the brand new science of space and well, science fiction.
Right, the dawn of the space age. Okay, let's jump forward a bit. December 1952. There was a mathematician, Lancelot Hogman. He publicly called for scientists to start sending radio signals out, deep into the solar system.
Yeah, his reasoning is interesting. He said he didn't want to visit Mars himself, but thought it might be smart to have a few chats with the Martians before sending rockets across space for a possible unfriendly reception.
Hey, talk about cautious optimism.
Indeed. But this is where the story takes an immediate, pretty surprising turn. Just 2 months after Hogman makes this public call, March 4th, 1954, the Los Angeles Times runs an article. And it reports that scientists believed small objects were already orbiting Earth.
Already orbiting. Before Sputnik.
That's what the report claimed. They even assigned some pretty prominent figures, Clyde Tombaugh, the guy who discovered Pluto, and Dr. Lincoln LaPaz, an astronomer known for studying meteors to actively search for these orbiting bodies. So the idea went from theoretical chat with Martians to maybe something's already here very quickly.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. Just 2 months after that, Major Donald Keyhoe, he headed NCAP, the biggest UFO research group at then. He announces that Air Force radar at White Sands had picked up 1 or 2 artificial satellites. And get this, in an unfamiliar retrograde orbit.
Retrograde, that's the key word there.
Exactly. And the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the San Francisco Examiner, Aviation Week in August 54, they all ran with this story, claiming objects were detected at 400 and 600 meters. Wait, did I read that right? Meters or miles? Let me check. Ah, yes, the LN says 400 meters and 600 meter altitude. Seems very low, maybe meant miles. Let's assume the original reports might have been confused or misprinted. Often altitudes were given in miles for space objects. Let's proceed, assuming it was miles for now, as meters would be impossible. So 400 and 600 miles up.
Right. Regardless of the exact altitude units confusion in the reporting, the retrograde orbit detail is what immediately raised red flags for scientists. They quickly pointed out that Earth just can't naturally capture objects, like asteroids, into a stable retrograde orbit. It means it's orbiting against Earth's rotation. It's incredibly unstable.
So natural capture is basically out.
Pretty much. Some early reports might have used the term natural satellites, but that idea was quickly seen as a virtual impossibility for that kind of orbit, which makes Keyhoe's claim of artificial satellites suddenly seem, well, much more compelling, doesn't it?
It definitely does. And then you had Captain Howard T. Orville weigh in, head of the President's Weather Control Commission.
Yes, in 1954, he went on WFBR radio and openly admitted he knew of no natural way for 2 objects to be orbiting at those altitudes in that manner. He told the interviewer straight up, "Your doubts are well justified."
Your doubts are well justified.
Hear that?
That's pretty blunt.
Ah.
Is he just saying, we don't know how nature could do this, or is he hinting at something more?
It feels like a bit of both, maybe. He's definitely acknowledging the scientific problem with a natural explanation for those specific orbits. But then, get this, 3 years later, Captain Orville's back on the same radio station. He reiterates his views about unknown satellites, and then he suggests, really, that the military might have kept the matter from publication.
Whoa. Kept it from publication.
That's the implication. And then he adds, really pointedly, but we didn't hear any more about it, did we? That question just hangs there, doesn't it? It's like he's nudging people to wonder what wasn't being said publicly.
Definitely feels like a nudge. And almost right after that, we get actual visual evidence. Potentially, December 18th, 1957, a Dr. Luis Corrales in Venezuela. He's photographing Sputnik 2 passing over Caracas.
Right. And when he develops the photos, bam, there's an unknown object seemingly shadowing the Russian satellite.
And researchers looked at this photo.
They did. And they concluded it wasn't a meteor, wasn't a star. Their determination, it was an unrecognizable kind of intelligently controlled craft, one capable of deviating from Sputnik 2's path and then returning to its side.
Okay, intelligently controlled craft. That's a huge leap from just object. The ability to deviate and return. That suggests propulsion control.
It absolutely does. It shifts the whole narrative, doesn't it? From just unexplained objects to potentially craft. And that leads us right into the 1960s, which saw, well, a real flurry of sightings.
Yeah, like January 1960. The Dark Fence satellite surveillance system. That's the U.S. Navy system, right? It detects another anomalous object, this time in a polar orbit.
Polar orbit, yeah. Meaning it travels over the north and south poles, basically allowing it to view the entire Earth over time.
And the reaction was intense. Commanding officer races to the Pentagon, reports this menacing stranger. The news goes straight to President Eisenhower, marked top secret. That level of urgency tells you something.
It certainly suggests they took it very, very seriously. Now, the news was made public about 3 weeks later. But Navy trackers confirmed it was definitely not Discoverer 8, an American satellite launched a couple of months earlier.
So what was it then?
Well, initial speculation flew around. Maybe it was Russian. Maybe it was a stray rocket body from the British Black Knight rocket project. And that's apparently where the object itself picked up its famous nickname, the Black Knight.
Ah, so the name came from potentially being a British rocket, not from its appearance initially.
Seems that way, yes. But then, a whole month later, Time magazine publishes an article with a contradictory official explanation. They claimed evidence from both the Air Force and Navy pointed to it being Discoverer 5.
Okay, Discoverer 5. Even though the Navy had initially said they knew where all the Discoverer satellites were, and this wasn't one of them, and they'd already ruled out Discoverer 8.
Exactly. You see the contradiction immediately. Navy says, definitely not Discoverer 8. Time says, official explanation is Discoverer 5. It highlights this pattern we keep seeing. A push towards a conventional, known explanation, even if it clashes with earlier statements or the actual data.
Especially for something that was initially top secret. It went to the president. You'd think they'd have their story straight.
You would think. And this mysterious object, it was even investigated by the CIA in March 1960. There were more sightings reported around then, too. A Swedish Airlines crew saw something their captain called, without a doubt, some form of satellite. The Stockholm Observatory also spotted it, certain it was a meteor.
And the CIA report mentioned even stranger things. Terns.
It did. It talked about a phantom satellite, designated 1960 Alpha, seen over Stockholm the same day, apparently making a 90-degree turn. And another skywatcher reported seeing two objects making a 180-degree turn.
90 degrees. 180 degrees in orbit. That's not how normal satellites behave. That requires significant propulsion and intention.
Precisely. These aren't passive orbital maneuvers. And this lines up with an account from Robert L. Johnson, the director of the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, and his colleague Frank Judson, also in 1960. They'd been studying a mysterious object that appeared intermittently. They stated quite positively it was not an artificial satellite or space rock.
Intermittently, so it wasn't always there.
Right. Judson added that it didn't maintain a regular schedule and appeared some nights and some nights it didn't. But they confirmed when it did appear, it was usually around the same time as the Echo 1 satellite, that big balloon satellite, but going the opposite direction, retrograde, at about twice as fast.
Okay, opposite direction, twice as fast, irregular schedule, not a satellite or space rock. But did Judson think it was a UFO?
Apparently not. Despite all that evidence pointing to something truly anomalous, when asked directly if he believed in UFOs, Judson said he did not.
Wow, that's some serious cognitive dissonance, isn't it? Observing all that data but refusing the unconventional conclusion.
It really makes you wonder. But then, things get even more concrete. September 1960. Grumman Aircraft Corporation, a major aerospace company, remember they successfully set up a tracking station specifically for this mystery object, and they photographed it.
I got a photo. Is that the famous one?
It's described in one source as the only confirmed photo of one of the mystery satellites available to the public. Grumman confirmed it showed up around the same time as Echo 1, that it varied in color from carrot to straw, and crucially, that it was in a retrograde east-to-west orbit. And just a few days before Grumman got their shot, someone in Bloomfield, Connecticut, took a photo showing Echo 1 with an unknown object clearly passing it.
Okay, so a photo from a major aerospace company confirming the retrograde orbit, the weird color changes. It's pretty solid physical evidence, isn't it?
It adds a very tangible layer, yes. And then you hear the story from Jacques Vallée, the famous computer scientist and UFO researcher. He recounted his experience at the Paris Observatory back in 1961. His team was tracking objects that weren't on the schedule of normal satellites. They gathered 11 data points on one particularly bright retrograde object.
And what happened to that data?
The person in charge of the project confiscated the tape and erased it the next morning. Vallée believed it was through fear of ridicule. He also later stated that other observatories had made exactly the same observation and that a lot of data was never published.
Erased through fear of ridicule. That's chilling. A direct example of potential data suppression right there. What about astronauts? Did any of them see anything related?
Well, there's the famous Gordon Cooper story from his 1963 Mercury mission. On his final orbit, he reported seeing a glowing green shape ahead of his capsule, actually heading towards him.
He reported it? To who?
To the Moochea tracking station in Australia. And get this, they confirmed it. They picked it up on radar, too, traveling in an east to west, so retrograde orbit.
Radar confirmation, so not just his eyes.
Right. NBC even reported the event initially, But then, crucially, reporters were explicitly forbidden to ask Cooper about it when he landed.
Forbidden. What was the official explanation then?
The official line was an electrical malfunction in the capsule supposedly caused high levels of carbon dioxide, which induced hallucinations.
Hallucinations that were also picked up on radar by a ground station in Australia.
Exactly. It's difficult to reconcile that explanation with the radar confirmation, and especially with Cooper's later statements. He became a very strong, very public advocate for serious UFO study. He even went to the United Nations, proposed an unbiased committee to study the phenomenon. He said, and this is a direct quote attributed to him, "I believe that these extraterrestrial vehicles and their crews are visiting this planet from other planets and are obviously a little more advanced than we are here on Earth."
Wow. From astronauts seeing a green blob explained away as a hallucination to UN proposals about alien visitors. That's quite an evolution. What about people involved in official investigations like Project Blue Book?
Ah, yes. J. Allen Hynek. He was the scientific consultant for the Air Force's Project Blue Book. He definitely seemed to, let's say, evolve in his thinking too. In 1966, he wrote this long letter to Science magazine. In it, he acknowledged the existence of unexplained UFO photos and radar trackings. He called for an end to the automatic ridicule of reliable witnesses.
Did he mention satellites specifically?
He did. He wrote about a photograph of a retrograde satellite that was taken 2 years before the Grumman photo. He stated that the speed of this unidentified object, calculated at Chicago's Adler Planetarium, remember Johnson and Judson, was 3 times that of any Earth-launched satellite at the time.
3 times faster. And retrograde. And Hynek, Blue Book's own consultant, is writing about this in Science magazine.
Precisely. And it's, well, perhaps notable that Project Blue Book itself, the official Air Force investigation into UFOs, was shut down just 4 years after Hynek wrote that letter.
Right. So, summing up this period, we have persistent signals, radar tracks, photos, astronaut sightings, objects doing impossible maneuvers, retrograde orbits, and official explanations that often seem contradictory or dismissive, sometimes even hinting at suppression. What are we supposed to make of all this?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? Let's look at John P. Bagby. He worked at Hughes Aircraft Company in their research division. He actually published articles about these odd satellites. In 1966, he reported on 2 swarms of these objects, also in retrograde orbits. He noted their brilliance suggested they weren't natural space debris. He initially thought one swarm had decayed out of orbit, but then he optically observed it again in January 1967.
So they persisted. Did he find anything else?
Yes, his later findings are pretty significant. He apparently correlated strange radio anomalies with the retrograde satellite's orbit, and he noted that the objects had actually changed orbit over time.
Changed orbit. That again points to non-natural behavior.
It does. And crucially, as late as 1981, Bagby clarified that at least one of these retrograde satellites was still in orbit. He even cited an old report from the Nature Journal back in 1880 describing retrograde bodies seen over Germany. Yet despite all these observations piling up from Bagby, from Grumman, from the observatories, the scientific consensus, publicly at least, remained firm. Earth cannot naturally capture satellites into stable retrograde or polar orbits.
Which brings us right back to that core dilemma mentioned in our sources, this idea of perceived scientific bias. The claim that scientists might just not risk their careers, their reputations by saying, hey, there are UFOs orbiting Earth. It's easier, safer maybe, to propose a natural satellite explanation, even if it's unlikely, just to get published in a journal like Nature.
It's a huge pressure, absolutely. The academic world can be brutal towards unconventional ideas, especially ones like this. Fear of ridicule is a powerful force, as Valley suggested. So if we push past that potential bias for a moment, what's the compelling evidence from the sources themselves suggesting these things are not natural? Let's list it out again.
Okay. They don't maintain a regular orbit. They appear and disappear.
Right. They've been described as having an odd color, like that carrot to straw variation Grumman saw.
They change direction 90 degrees, 180 degrees. That's not orbital mechanics.
And they reflect radio signals, which is considered impossible for natural objects like asteroids or moonlets. They're not typically reflective in that way.
So when you put all those characteristics together, the erratic movement, the color, the impossible orbits, the radio reflection, it really paints a picture of something. Well, artificial, doesn't it? Even if it defies our conventional understanding of who might have put it there.
It certainly pushes strongly in that direction, based purely on the reported observations across decades.
And bringing this closer to our own time, the sources mention numerous UFO reports from astronauts on shuttle missions, videos of space shuttles apparently being tracked by UFOs while in orbit. It feels like the evidence, or at least the reports, haven't stopped accumulating.
No, they haven't. And that includes more recent visual evidence that caused quite a stir. Remember the 1998 Space Shuttle Endeavour mission, STS-88, the first mission to the International Space Station?
Vaguely, yeah. What happened?
The astronauts took photographs of a very unusual object in low Earth orbit. These photos were initially put up on NASA's public website, widely available.
Okay, so what's the catch?
The catch is, according to the sources we looked at, they all disappeared from the site, vanished, only to reappear sometime later, often with new URLs, and crucially, with new descriptions explaining them away as just pieces of debris or space junk,
Even though the original photos were described
as high quality and unmistakably showed some type of craft. So the narrative actively shifted from unidentified object to explainable junk.
That sounds familiar. The explanation changing after the fact.
It's a recurring theme. And another fairly recent instance mentioned, October 7, 2014, during a spacewalk outside the ISS, apparently a mysterious craft appears and hovers for a few seconds in the background just below the astronauts. And this was captured on NASA's own live camera feed.
Wow. On the live feed.
So the sources claim, and these more recent incidents, they tie right back into the criticisms we found in the material regarding official agencies. There's this strong sentiment expressed that maybe we're not looking for it properly, that maybe we rely too heavily on official sources, NASA, ESA, etc., whose data some speculate might be altered or perhaps never accurate when it comes to things like this.
Which leads to that call for amateur astronomers to step up.
Exactly. A call for them to conduct a serious observing campaign to specifically look for these things, even if they're in hard-to-observe polar orbits and don't pass over populated areas frequently. The idea is don't wait for officialdom, let's look ourselves.
It does highlight a kind of perceived hypocrisy, doesn't it? The sources point out how people might readily accept, say, NASA's own videos showing UFOs during shuttle missions because they're official footage, but then turn around and deny the possibility of something like the Black Knight satellite, even when presented with similar NASA-sourced imagery of weird objects like those STS-88 photos before they were relabeled.
It really speaks to the power of established narratives, maybe, and maybe confirmation bias. It's easier to accept something if it fits, however awkwardly, into the official view than to accept something that fundamentally challenges it, like a century-old orbiting mystery object. Now, Bob Fager, who did a lot of research for one of our sources, he summarizes several speculative theories about what the Black Knight might actually be or what its purpose could be.
Okay, like what?
Well, one idea is that it's a kind of historical record, left behind by some advanced civilization that maybe had to leave Earth long ago. Another theory picks up on Duncan Lunin's interpretation that it's a time capsule, deliberately placed by off-worlders from Epsilon Boötis.
The 12,000-year-old probe idea.
Right. And then there's a third theory mentioned, which is, well, it's pretty far out there. It tries to connect the satellite to recent discoveries of extremely high levels of particulate radiation found in Siberian mammoth layers.
High radiation. In mammoths. How does
Yeah.
that connect to a satellite?
The speculation, and it is wild speculation, ties it to ancient galactic wars and some kind of resulting planetary contamination, with the satellite possibly being related to that ancient conflict or its aftermath. It definitely stretches the imagination.
Galactic wars. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pushing it. But it's interesting to see the range of explanations people come up with when faced with such a persistent unknown.
Absolutely. And it's important we cover the full spectrum found in the source material, even the really speculative stuff. But what's truly fascinating, I think, is circling back to Captain Orville's comments from the 1950s.
His hint about a cover-up.
Exactly that hesitant implication. But we didn't hear any more about it, did we? It serves as such a powerful, almost poignant, concluding thought on this whole historical narrative of potential suppression. It connects that early mystery directly to the patterns of information control or perceived control that seem to run through this entire story right up to the present day.
What an incredible journey we've taken then. Through, over 120 years of strange signals, mysterious objects whizzing about in orbit, photos, astronaut reports, all these tantalizing clues. From Tesla hearing 1, 2, 3 to NASA live feeds, we've seen these recurring patterns again and again. Objects in impossible orbits, things appearing and disappearing, and just persistent nagging questions about what they are and where they came from.
And the core tension, it really hasn't gone away, has it? It's the scientific community's understandable adherence to known natural explanations versus this mounting pile of anomalous observations that just seem to defy those explanations. The question of the Black Knight's true origins, is it an alien probe? Is it some incredibly rare, misunderstood natural phenomenon? Is it multiple unrelated things conflated over time, or something else entirely? It really remains unsettlingly open, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. So for you, our curious listener, maybe the provocative thought to leave you with is this. If these objects, or even just some of them, are indeed artificial and have been observed, documented, argued about for over a century, what does that really imply? What does it imply about our understanding of space, our history, and maybe, just maybe, about who is or perhaps has been watching us? What does it mean if the answers or at least more clues are out there, but perhaps we're subtly or not so subtly encouraged not to look too closely? What will you choose to do with this knowledge?